Kansas State just picked up their best piece in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. We're diving into some huge portal chatter today. One of the biggest commitments all season long and probably in both portals for Kansas State. It's going to be a really exciting episode, and I'm really excited to break it down. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit like, leave a comment, join the conversation here at Locked On Kansas State, where we're bringing you daily Kansas State Wildcat content every single day like no one else. All right, let's dive into it. This is going to be an exciting episode because I think this is the best portal edition in Kansas State all year long. With the winter portal edition, with the spring portal edition, you name it. This is a true plug-and-play player. This is a player that could be a day one starter on the offensive line for Kansas State. And potentially, we could see his name being called, just with going back to what we just saw this past weekend, the NFL draft next season. J.B. Nelson commits to Kansas State, offensive lineman from Penn State, coming over from the Nittany Lions. And I say offensive lineman, I don't say guard, I don't say tackle, because that's one of the prime things about him. Versatility is a huge thing. He can be either a guard or a tackle, and he has played both. And he's played meaningful snaps on both guard and tackle for Penn State, a team that has won 20-plus games over the last two seasons and went to the college football playoff semifinals just this past season. He had a huge part of that, played in multiple games, started multiple games in 2023, played in all 16 games, 16 games in 2024. They went a long way, all the way to the semis. You get to play 16 games when that happens. Insane. And was, again, a huge piece. His former head coach, James Franklin, the head coach of Penn State Nittany Lions, called him a Swiss Army knife. And now he's coming to Brian LePeck, the offensive line coach, and the Kansas State Wildcats. Very exciting stuff, and we'll dive into him, get a little bit to know him on this episode. Former offensive lineman for Penn State, transfers into Kansas State in his final year of college eligibility. And this could be a piece that we are talking about all season long as, again, a starter, wherever he decides to start, guard, tackle. James Franklin, another quote from him at one point, said he could play all five positions on the offensive line, including center. But I think that's already secured with Kansas State with Sam Heck. But we get to see him bolster the Wildcats offensive line with that depth and versatility, as I mentioned. But let's get a little bit into his background. Hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, played at Lackawanna College in Scranton, was the number 5 JUCO transfer before going into Penn State, playing for the Nittany Lions starting in 2022. Played in 31 games over 3 seasons, starting in 8 of them. In the 2024 season, he appeared, as I mentioned, in all 16 games, primarily serving as a rotational player. And he lost his starting job in 2024, but it's not like he lost it to a scrub. Penn State probably has, dare I say, the best offensive line in all of college football, and both the guards on Penn State right now are All-American type players. And we're getting a player in J.B. Nelson who is named the all Big Ten honorable mention. So it's not like he's a depth piece from a Power 4 school, from a Big Ten school, where in a comparison like a George Fitzpatrick, which we are super excited about, and I'm excited to talk about George Fitzpatrick more this season. I was excited for him to transfer in. But when he came over from Ohio State, he didn't have this type of experience. Still really excited for his upside. But J.B. Nelson is a completely different story. You're getting a 5-year player going into his 6th season with prime Power 4 experience. 31 games over 3 seasons on the offensive line, and arguably one of the greatest offensive lines in college football, if not the best. I mean, what Penn State has done with that running back room over the past couple seasons with their duo of Nick Singleton and Allen, I think his last name is. It's super impressive. It is super impressive knowing that he had a good part of that. And we've seen him guard and tackle. I've seen him do some really nice things with polling. His polling attributes looks really good. He's a very physical guy. It's exciting to watch, and he's no small guy either. I mean, we're talking over 320 pounds. I just had the numbers up for him, and of course the link isn't loading when I'm talking to you. Here it is: 6'5", 325. Insane. So you get your size on the offensive line, and this was something that turned into a necessity, more of a priority for Kansas State heading into this spring portal window. And when this portal window opened, I didn't really see any sort of priority because we had such a great winter transfer portal, and we brought in some offensive linemen. Obviously, some of those didn't work. We saw some go away, let go, whether they was the 105 roster limit that we don't know if it's actually going to stay true. But Coach Kleiman and his coaching staff gave some players the opportunity to go elsewhere just in case that happened because they're just good people. But this offensive line turned into a possibility, or a need, if you will. And I think they slam dunked the need into a player that this would have been the best portal addition if they would have did it in the wintertime. I'm glad they got it in the spring, though, because I think overall now, when we look at this offensive group, this offensive line group, as of right now, I don't think there's a single issue with this offense. And with the fact of how the portal worked for Kansas State this past season, I mean, having perfect portal additions and hardly any departures, and those departures weren't impactful players right away for Kansas State, you got to think that Arlington is a very clear sight, right in the sights for this team to get back to the Big 12 championship like they did in 2022. And then with all sights, all eyes on the college football playoffs, adding a player like this who had a visit to Manhattan and then immediately committed to Kansas State, he sees it. He sees how many offensive linemen get drafted from Kansas State into the NFL draft who have great success at the next level. This guy has the ability to be in the next draft, and he'll get to represent Kansas State with the line on there because he'll play his final season with the Wildcats. Super cool stuff, and he has the opportunity to do some really nice things for Kansas State. Will he play guard? Will he play tackle? That's the biggest question moving forward. A little bit more about him. When you're talking about his roles, you mentioned he can be either. He can be guard, he can be tackle. ESPN put out a ranking just a few days ago, actually on Monday. Max Olson put this out, ranking the best players in the spring college football transfer portal. And it was the top 25 players, and JB Nelson came on the list. He came right in at number 25 with Kansas State right next to him on the name. And that's super exciting to see that, knowing that you have a top 25 portal grab, according to ESPN, in the spring window. We see all these Big 12 teams, for example, Texas Tech, spending all this money, finding a way to see their name rise up even more. And you're not hearing much about Kansas State. And that's a great thing. That's a great thing that many people aren't talking about Kansas State this offseason, because let them be quiet. Let them forget about this team. Let them forget about their great 7-1 start, because this team is coming back with a vengeance. We have proof. Us fans know it. It's coming. Who left? Not really anybody of high importance that is going to impact this team. People coming in are going to make a much more of an impact than the people leaving out. The background on ESPN and the scouts take here, I thought was really cool. He said Nelson will be sought after as a veteran presence with size, which is obviously him coming to Kansas State. His size, strength, and starting experience. He plays with a physicality that if you want on the interior, he adds value with his swing potential to play both tackle position as well as guard. He's long with above average agility and movement skills in pass pro. His strong hands with a good base generate a push as an interior run blocker, and Nelson lays the game with good physicality and is a finisher. And as I mentioned, I think he's also very good with the pull game. Penn State pulled him a lot, and he was very physical and good. Even at that size and stature, he was very good getting that movement, even in pass protection, not just in the running game, although we saw him doing a lot with the running game. And if you want to go in the whole statistics with PFF and things like that, his running grades were a lot better than his pass grades. Kind of makes more sense based off his size, but overall, really liking what he's bringing to Kansas State. And according to ESPN, what he brings to Kansas State, they say, Olsen says, quote, "It'll be interesting to see which spot new Kansas State offensive line coach Brian LePeck envisions for Nelson when he arrives. Could he compete for a starting spot at right tackle? Is he coming in to provide depth and let another lineman move outside? The Wildcats took a chance on FCS transfer Brandon Snee from Wagner this offseason, but he's already back in the portal. So it's not a surprise that Kansas State was looking for depth and competition. So what position will he play? Well, that's the next question we'll dive into next right here, and we'll talk about the entire offensive line right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Did you see how those Indiana Pacers are looking lately? My God, it's been really interesting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is super high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets even closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. That's perfect timing when you're talking playoff basketball. Here's why I use Game Time, not just because of that Game Time price, but those last-minute deals, like I mentioned, save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets on sports and concerts, comedy, theater, everything you love, you name it, it's perfect. Their all-in-one pricing also means no surprise fees at checkout when you see what you pay for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Hit that subscribe button. We are growing so fast. We are at 830-something subscribers. It's fantastic. It's so cool seeing this number grow, and I thank you so much for listening and joining every day. If you're listening in audio form, even better. Thank you so much for that. Those numbers are growing. We are on pace. We've already surpassed it. There's still a couple days left in April, but both on the audio and the YouTube side, we have had more views or listens this month, for the month of April, more than any other month since Locked On Kansas State has been alive. So thank you very much for being an everyday listener, and I can't wait for you to come back for another episode and continue these conversations because they're just so much fun. We're diving into the new portal edition and my favorite portal edition. I'm not afraid to say it after seeing some of these highlights and some of these tapes. I've had a couple days to chew on it. JB Nelson from Penn State, the Nittany Lions offensive lineman, is now a Kansas State Wildcat. Versatility is a huge thing. Will he be offensive tackle, JB Nelson, or offensive guard, JB Nelson? I think there'll be a little bit of both when it's all said and done. But the opportunities are endless, and I think he'll play on the right side regardless, whether it's right guard or right tackle. And we'll see if it's just him in right guard and they move Lane Gang out to right tackle, or the other way around, where you have Lane Gang at right guard and him at right tackle. I think you're going to see this nice ability to be able to move around and make things work. Now, you obviously know you got Heck at center, and then you have Taylor Potier, who, according to Brian LePeck, is in the best shape of his life. He'll probably be the left guard, assuming that he continues that. So what's that leave? That leaves the left tackle spot open. We got a couple players that you can keep in mind there, right? Maybe George Fitzpatrick makes that move. You got Hawkins as well. There's a couple other players, veteran players, interior linemen, usually like Pastore. Can he stay healthy? Can he make that move? I mean, I'm talking about more than 5 offensive linemen right here. That's a great feeling to have, knowing that there's now we entered the winter with some big questions. After losing some players to graduation and the portal, we entered the winter with huge questions. Now we're sitting at the end of April, which we might still have more additions in the future, but now we're sitting at the end of April with multiple players that could start on this offensive line and feel comfortable about being on this offensive line, and then plus some depth behind that. It's a great feeling to have at the end of April, heading into May. When spring practice is all over, then you can just focus on some of the other pieces and then finally start working on where to plug and play in the depth chart. And the reason I say where to plug and play, because a few weeks ago when we talked to LePeck, he wasn't really focused on the depth chart. He was focused on just making sure players were ready to go and getting as many players ready to go as possible. And I think that all stems from what happened last year when he was the tight ends coach. By week 4 or 5, he was already down to his 4th tight end. And I don't think he was expecting that. So offensive line is obviously a more aggressive position. You got to worry about more positions as well. And injuries do happen. This 12-game season, if it only goes 12, I mean, worst case scenario, I'm assuming it goes 13. But like JB Nelson did last year, I'm hoping Kansas State goes 16 games this year. And I have a good feeling it could. Based on the players not leaving in the portal, this momentum that we continue to carry on since that crazy comeback win against Rutgers in the Rape Bowl, this amazing recruiting class we've had, the winter portal, the no one leaving in both the winter and the spring portal, and now additions like this, JB Nelson, who has NFL pedigree talent that is going to be on this offensive line this coming season. So 16 games, you're going to probably get some injuries on the offensive line. Even at 12, you're going to most likely have some bangs and bruises on this offensive line. So the more depth, the better, right? It doesn't go away. You need that. You need more than 5. I don't think I have to be a rocket scientist to know that one. Interesting stuff here. Really exciting things. And there's probably more room in the portal as well. There's absolutely more room in the portal as well. There was a couple other players that visited this past weekend. I'm sure Kansas State's not done. I think they're going to get a little bit more additions as well. Gotta love that. Gotta love what we're seeing from this Kansas State Wildcats squad. And history, the greatness from this offensive line and how it's going to continue in 2025, I think, is a good indicator of why we saw a player like JB Nelson immediately commit. Now, I'm sure there was probably some other incentives as well, but you have to think about when everybody is willing to throw NIL at you, and if the NIL is even in certain areas, then that no longer becomes a factor. It might help you trim down the fat of some of the programs interested. But when that NIL becomes even among multiple programs, then you have to look at other factors. And those factors are, can they help me develop to be an NFL talent player? Because a player like JB Nelson isn't looking to finish his career playing football after this season. If he was, then he probably would have stayed with Penn State. It's not that he was kicked off the team because of this 105 roster thing. He had the opportunity to play. He played in all 16 games for Penn State last year. Now, did he start? No. And he probably would be in that same type of role this season. But if he was looking to finish his collegiate career, I'm sure he'd probably want to stick with Penn State, a team that is probably going to do really well in the Big Ten this next season. They're bringing back their quarterback. Their offensive line is stout. They're probably going to be another really good team this next year. But instead, he wants to show that he can be a starter in a Power 4 conference and raise his draft stock, get more tape on him, get more snaps under his belt. So NFL scouts can look at him. Oh, and by the way, he's going to a program that multiple players have been drafted or have NFL chances. We saw Cooper Beebe do it a few years ago. Easton Kitley just signed an undrafted free agent deal with the New Orleans Saints this past weekend. It continues. And that's just the recent ones. Really great stuff from Kansas State, adding in JB Nelson. And will he be a day one starter? I think so. The biggest question is, will he be at guard or tackle? I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I'm going to say tackle. I'm going to say he becomes the right tackle to keep Langang in at guard, but I could be completely wrong. I think it could go either way. I think those are the two, if healthy, though, that are on the right side of the offensive line, no matter which way you flip it. Right guard, right tackle. And if that's the case, that's exciting stuff. With him being a 6-year starter, let's just say he's the right tackle of the future. 6 years at right tackle. Then you got Langang, who's in his 5th year. You got Heck, and then on the left guard, you got Potier, who's in his 6th year. That's an experienced offensive line that is set to be in front of Avery Johnson for his 2nd year under center. And people are doubting Kansas State. People don't think that this team has what it takes. Recency bias, I get it. I understand. You start 7-1, you end 8-4, right? 9-4 with the bowl win. Watch out. This team has the momentum. I know I say this momentum thing a lot, and I've talked about it ever since this beginning of the winter transfer portal. But I really, truly believe it's real. I believe it's real. Ever since the issues from Farmageddon, from the Houston game was the thing that knocked it off the rails. I get that. Arizona State played like crap. Iowa State showed some life, just couldn't finish. The comeback win at Rutgers with the new play style, the jet sweeps, with the offensive explosion, with the defensive play from the young studs, the secondary showing with some young players, and then that comeback victory by no other than Avery Johnson, that was the momentum shift that this program needed. And they continued to build that momentum with a recruiting class, a transfer portal ×2. When you look at both windows, and then players sticking around. And it continues right here with NFL talent like play from JB Nelson. Super exciting stuff. Super exciting stuff. Let's talk more about this edition and more football stuff next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place a $5 bet, you can get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy. Love the interface, and whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into the player props, I am absolutely hooked on FanDuel. From 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuels have so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into the same game parlay for your chance to win big. So don't miss out. Again, place your first $5 bet, get a $250 bonus bet. So head to FanDuel.com and claim that bonus bet today. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and let's continue talking about this exciting portal piece with JB Nelson coming in from Penn State. This offensive line just looks super exciting, and now there's 3 really impressive portal additions to this offensive line. And before I get into the other 2, kind of already mentioned them in passing, but first, there's a couple other quotes that I found, and this was on Blue White Illustrated. It's the On3 website for Penn State, talking about when JB Nelson decided to enter the transfer portal. There was a couple quotes that in the article that just really interest me. Phil Troutwin, I think is how you say his name, the offensive line coach for Penn State, said just before he decided to enter the portal, he said that JB Nelson's competing. He's getting better. He's out there right now just working. He took most of the reps with the 1s, but also gets some 2s because he wants to rotate guys in. So all the way up until he was entering the portal for Penn State, he was getting reps with the number 1 team. And as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I truly believe that Penn State is one of the top offensive line groups in the country. Probably, let's say, just to make it safe, top 3. And it's probably not 3. It is one of the top, most premier offensive lines in the country. And he has got reps with the ones and started with the ones, played in games for 3 seasons now. 31 games he played in over 3 seasons, starting 8 of them. This isn't a player that you're getting that is coached by these Power 4 schools, but doesn't have experience and is entering the portal to look for that experience. This is almost like a unicorn type feel for this kind of player, especially this late in the cycle. So really exciting stuff that Kansas State had the ability to land, especially since they missed out on another offensive lineman they had the opportunity to get for earlier in the year, earlier in this cycle, because they were looking to add another one. He actually stayed with the Big 12, went to Cincinnati, and that was Joe Cotton out of South Dakota. There was some talk that Joe Cotton was potentially going to go to Kansas State. Not sure how much of a likelihood that was, but Cotton wound up going to Cincinnati. We'll not see him this year, but he's a Big 12 offensive lineman now. So with that being said, as I mentioned, 3 transfer portal offensive linemen between the winter and the spring. It was 4, but Brandon Snee, he enters the winter portal, he leaves in spring. And credit to the coaching staff for this one, because, hey, it's a tough conversation, one, to tell these players about the assumption of, cutting down to 105, that these players are probably not going to make the roster and they should look for elsewhere and enter the portal. Now, we'll see what happens if some of these players come back, because of this judge hearing is looking to grandfather in these roster sizes and not make the 105 a thing. As of right now, we haven't heard anything finalized. When we do, we'll have you covered here on an episode of Locked On Kansas State, because it's super important stuff that it needs to be covered. But as of right now, they are working towards, limiting this roster, because they think it's the right thing to do, to let players that they think will not be there if that roster size does go to 105 to go and look for other places of college football employment. One of those players was Brandon Snee, who entered in the winter and left in the spring. And I don't know if they just thought that his skill wasn't good enough or he wasn't going to get the playing time. So that was the conversation. Not sure what the conversation was had, but he's no longer with the program. And if you're going to compare apples to oranges in this context, putting Brandon Snee, an FCS transfer, to JB Nelson, a Power 4 Big 10 transfer with playing time at that level, it is absolutely an improvement. I don't have to put that one on paper to explain that one. And then you got George Fitzpatrick coming over from Ohio State, who is like the typical Power 4 transfer to another Power 4 school, a depth piece that didn't have any experience but is looking for that experience. Everybody has loved him since he's transferred over here. We've heard so many good things about him, raving about him in the weight room, strength conditioning. We've seen people are shouting him out during spring practices. Maybe he finds himself a spot, that left tackle spot. Maybe that's his. Who knows? And then, although I mentioned that Taylor Poitier is in the best shape of his life entering his 6th college season, then there's an opportunity that we'll see the other transfer potentially battling with him. And that's Amos Talele from USC coming over in the winter portal, and heard great things about him and his workload. I guess what I'm all trying to say after this entire episode today, one, I absolutely love the addition of JB Nelson. I don't think that could be overstated, which I'm really excited about. But with these other 2 transfer portal additions, with other than Nelson, with Fitzpatrick and Talele, and then plus the already veteran presence that you had staying with Kansas State, this offensive line is in really good shape, folks. It didn't feel that way after Rutgers, after the graduation, after some of the players leaving in the portal. I didn't feel that way. I felt a little bit of concern, and it was overshadowed because the main priority, the main red flags were wide receiver and secondary, because those were the glaring needs. And we always think that, offensive line will be fine. We've had this historically good offensive line. And I think there was a moment of weakness, saying after we attack the secondary and the wide receiver group, where then it became the number 1 priority. And I can tell you right now, with great confidence, that as we sit right now today, The offensive line is not a worry. This position group is going to have a great season heading in to 2025. Can't wait to see these big boys play in Dublin. Let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. Got plenty more coming out for you to finish out the month here at Locked On Kansas State. Be sure to subscribe and stay subscribed. We are bringing new content every single day, multiple episodes coming every single day. We're going to finish this week strong. Then I got a really cool series coming up starting next week where we dive into every single team to make sure you are the most informed, not only Kansas State fan, but Big 12 fan out there. I'm bringing you all the knowledge you need for you to sit at the bar and talk to any Big 12 fan and make sure you're more knowledgeable than them. That's the best feeling in the world, right? Knowing you know more than them. Well, I'm here for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. Thanks for watching. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.